Welcome to the first episode of the Disruptive Love Podcast. Our goal is to positively disrupt love, dating, and all types of relationships. I'm David Bennett.
And I'm Jonathan Bennett. And today we're going to talk to our good friend and Catholic priest in the Diocese of Columbus, Father Joshua Wagner.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. How about
you?
you?
All right. It's been a long day, but it's been a good day, and now we're here yakking on the Love Disrupted podcast, so that's all right.
Disruptive love, but that's okay.
Whatever, it's the same thing.
It's our first episode,
Yeah.
so this is understandable.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about issues of religion, attraction, and relationships, and it's going to be a great time. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Father Wagner?
Well, I think the reason I'm here, obviously this is not a religious podcast, but I am religious because of what I do for a living, but I do a lot of weddings, and I see a lot of couples, and I'm not married myself because the church hasn't let us, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing at this point of my life, because sometimes when I get the celibacy blues, I just have to sit down with a couple and think to myself, no, I don't think I could be married like that the rest of my life. So, I do a lot of weddings. I've been a priest for 14 years, and I've probably done about 220 weddings or so, all over the world. Different
Excellent.
Languages I've done them, and so I go all over the place. So if you're looking for a wedding priest, fatherwagner.com. That was a shameless plug for me. But I've seen it all, and also in the church we have something called annulments, which is basically like Catholic divorce. So I see a lot of that. I don't see as many of those just because people don't usually want them until they want to get married again, and I hate doing them. They're awful. But I see a lot of that as well. So I'm somewhat of an expert in relationships. I know everything about relationships, in fact, and I'm not just saying that. I read a lot about it, and I have a lot of experience talking to relationships, ones that are happy and together, and others that are not so happy and falling apart. So that's kind of what I'm here for.
Well, we're glad to have you. You're perfect for this podcast.
You are, and David and I grew up in an environment where, very religious environment,
Yes.
church, youth groups, mission trips, all of that. And honestly, our assessment was that the people that we saw at the religious events who were into church, so to speak, didn't always behave all that differently from the non-religious people.
In terms of their relationships and dating.
Yeah,
and attraction,
and in other
yeah.
ways, but definitely in relationships and dating. I mean, we had the player guys in youth group who would be like praising Jesus on Sunday, but the night before, I don't even know what they were doing. I probably don't want to know.
Or you probably do. Who knows?
I might. Not now. Maybe then I did. But the biggest thing we saw was you would have a lot of these devout, pious women who would be very into the church, very active, and their husbands would be at home every Sunday. They would go out drinking with their friends, had what we thought were very few religious values at all, but they seemed to have at least a happy marriage.
And we were reading, in fact, you follow, I know, Rolf Dagan on Twitter. If you haven't followed him, great person to follow. He's a science writer, and we were looking at some of the research he compiled today. And a lot of the studies do really basically show that in terms of actual behavior, religious people and non-religious people pretty much end up acting the same way. So, and he calls that Janus faced, after the Roman god of doorways, because Janus is often portrayed as facing both directions, having two faces. So, in summary, what religious people often say are their values don't line up with their actual behaviors. So in terms of relationships, what's your take on that?
Well, I think that, I think anybody's everybody's a hypocrite at some point in their life. Nobody completely espouses the values that they put forth. It doesn't matter if you're a holy roller and go to church every Sunday or every day, or it doesn't matter if you're environmentalist, or even a vegan. The vegans always, promote their lifestyle, but I know a lot of vegans that slip every so often, right? So, I mean, or people that protest one thing or another may not, truly espouse what they're saying. And then I think in some sense what they're shooting for is an ideal. And so I think that's what religious people are doing too. Mm-hmm. And you can be religious in a lot of different ways. You can be a religious football fan, you can be religious atheist, you can be religious, in the sense that that's what defines you and gives you purpose. You can be a religious vegan, a religious environmentalist, religious in terms of politics. So I'm kind of defining religion kind of loosely here as your sort of belief system. And the reason you have that is because you're kind of striving for an ideal. And everybody falls short of that ideal. Every single person does. I fall short of it, you fall short of it. There's nobody that's perfect.
Is that a height joke?
No, no, it's not at all. But I think that I do think that there's a big difference now versus like 20 years ago. Even the people, I've been a priest for 14 years, but in the church for longer than that, about over 20 years now. And I would say people 20 years ago were more sincerely practicing their religion than they are today.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's who you're talking about here. I think who you're talking about are the people that sort of, say the rosary on Sunday and because they partied too hard the night before, sort of that sort of thing. So there's always a hypocrisy there. There's always this idea that you're striving for something, and even if you fall short, that you keep that sort of thing. But I would say that most couples, I'd say that out of 100 couples, only maybe 3 are truly religious and practice their values.
Interesting.
A lot of people claim to be Catholic, but they don't practice it. Just like the vegans, there's vegans that I've seen eat bacon, and that they're like, well, this is vegan bacon. It's like, no, it's not. It's all you take it off the pig. So excluding those 3 that are super, super pious and religious and who knows what they're doing, a lot of people that claim to be religious or even moderately religious or even minorly religious are really not practicing what they preach in many ways. So I think I think all religion is there to sort of give you an ideal, and many people fall short of that ideal. But even the people that, I've been to World Youth Days where I saw some things that were just appalling from
and that's a national
kids.
Gathering of Catholic youth throughout the whole world, right?
Yeah. So I just think that I think that people try. I think again they're not necessarily perfect in what they preach or even practice what they preach. Well, I would give you, for instance, most couples are living together now. Mm-hmm. I don't ever assume that they're not. I'm surprised that they're not living together. When they give me 2 different addresses, either they're lying to me or they are weird. I mean, in terms of the culture, And so I just think that I think that we have to understand what religion is there for. It's to give us an ideal and to strive for that, but then most people don't meet that ideal.
Well, in a lot of the Janus Faith stuff we see, and it's not even just related to religion, is on one hand, the people who want to date, they have these high ideals, this checklist of standards. Then on the other side, this raw attraction confronts them. So they say, I want a guy who does X, Y, and Z, but they see this guy who's tall and muscular with a charming personality, and suddenly all of that goes out the window. How much of that do you see in a religious context, where someone might say, I want to date this great Christian good guy who's going to do X, Y, and Z for me, but then they meet this guy who just does it for them from an attractive standpoint, and they fall for that guy?
Well, I think I encounter that more in the confessional than I do in
I'm sure
people
you do.
getting married. Yeah, because typically they're not going to marry that guy. They're going to marry the safer choice typically, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Most people are getting married older these days too. When I was first ordained, people were 26, and now I'd say the average is about 29. So I think that has something to do with it. I think people have slimmer pickings as they get older too. So, but everybody in there, I've heard college confessions, and I think that's a great way to go. These super pious men and women both. It's not just women; it's men and women both that are rolling on the floor, and they go to mass every day, and then they come to confession, and then they're confessing. They got drunk and had sex with 4 people over the weekend. Very common to have these very pious people come to confession and confess that sort of thing. So again, I think there's an interior struggle with the whole thing, but I think that I don't think they mean to be hypocrites. I just think that they are. I think that there's this 2 parts to our brain.
Right.
That there's this part that is rational and has an ideal in mind, and we want to follow that. And then there's the part that actually makes the decisions for us. It's like, sometimes I want to eat candy bars all day, and I know that's not a right idea, or I should eat vegetables. That's a better example, but I eat candy bars all day. I don't ever actually eat candy bars all day, but you know what I mean. The same is.
I'm
true
taking notes because that's
right.
It's the same is true with people that are quote unquote religious. Is that they have an ideal in mind, and then they fall short of it, and they fall short of it frequently and very boldly. I've heard a lot of high school confessions too, and another thing that's
those are very interesting.
Yeah, I kind of think that's going on with the what's going on with the high school kids is that they're getting involved sexually younger and younger with each other. So I think that's they're getting sexually involved younger, but they're getting married older. I don't know how that all works out in the end of the day, but I can tell you that again, you could go to a good pious Catholic school and Mary Sue comes in, who is just gleaming with grace and virginity, and she's the biggest floozy in the whole place.
That's
Honestly,
a good word choice.
Yeah, it happens a lot where somebody's left the confessional. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that was that type of person. So not that I judge people very often, but sometimes I get surprised at who's making what confession, and sometimes it's the people that you least expect that are out there. Just like, I'll give you another example. I knew this one. She was a motivational speaker about chastity.
Yeah.
like nationally known.
I think I know where this is going. This is great.
And,
Keep
yeah,
going. Keep
well,
going.
she wasn't
Keep
nationally
going.
known. She's locally known. She wasn't. I don't think she was nationally known, but that was kind of her thing. She worked for like Chastity Network or something like that. I don't know if that's a thing. But on the side, she actually was in a long-term sexual relationship with somebody.
Wow.
Now that is not to say that everybody that promotes chastity is a hypocrite, but I do think that there is. Again, I think that you have to look at religion for what it is. It's this ideal that people strive for, and then when they fall short, they're embarrassed about falling short. Like that girl could never have stood up and said those things, you know. And I've known guys do the same thing. I've known people that are youth ministers and teach religion, and they have they're living with somebody, you know, and that kind of thing's going on. So I don't know. It's again, I think that I don't think people are trying to be insincere, but I do think that as one of our favorite people says, you deny human nature at your own peril.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's not a surprise to me when people are not living up to what they promote themselves to be.
Well, and that's kind of something we see and we talk about a lot is this thing you see where someone will. I was just on a dating discussion the other day where someone was saying, you know, she has chemistry with this guy, she really likes him, but he's probably not good for her. So there's this other guy who logically makes perfect sense, but he does nothing for her. And my response was basically, you don't want to end up with a guy who does nothing for you romantically, because eventually it will come out. Something will happen where this guy who bores you to tears, you will slip up, you will sin, to use religious language, because you don't really want to be with this guy at an emotional level.
Well, I had this one experience where this is many years ago, where this woman comes in and she tells me she's not attracted to her husband, and they're devout, devout every week kind of people, and they sat in the front row of the church, and their whole family looked perfect. They looked perfect. Underneath it all, they were just a complete train wreck. Underneath it all, and she told me, I'm kind of mixing stories here actually, so that's good to mix stories.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Keep it anonymous.
Yeah, keep it anonymous.
Yes.
But she came in and she said that she was absolutely unattracted to her husband. And when he finally came in and he said, "Well, she's so pushy that I don't stand up to her anymore. I mean, just whatever she says, I agree with." And then she wasn't attracted to him anymore because he was a pushover. So I mean, she kind of got stuck with a nice guy, who, because he was a nice guy, made himself unattracted to her. And she became attracted to somebody else who was kind of more of a, assertive, aggressive kind of type of person, and that was a very strange situation. I'm mixing stories here, but of people that I've seen, and you can espouse. I think that sometimes you can espouse ideals to an extent that are harmful. You can be too much of a pushover. Jesus wasn't a pushover. He let himself get crucified, but I mean that's not exactly. That was for different reasons. But I mean, he flipped tables over and he got mad at people, and he wasn't a pushover whatsoever in his whole time. So, but sometimes I think we espouse that sort of ideal. Like if I'm going to be a good Christian, I need to be passive, and women don't like that. Women get disgusted with their husbands after a while because they're just pushovers. I mean, when women want somebody who's going to be assertive and stand up and be a man, Well,
that's of course you've known us for a while, and that's what we harp on a lot is a lot of this traditional dating advice that you get from people. It just really is kind of bogus. I mean, people would probably say your advice to a couple would be to stand up to each other a little more, but I think in the long run that is far more effective from a chemistry and getting along standpoint.
Well, that's why we even did this podcast.
Yes,
we want to disrupt a lot of these traditional things that everybody says these don't work, but no one really wants to address. Like the whole yes dear. That's the standard of yes dear. You say yes dear and you have a happy marriage. But as we know, women might share that as a meme, but they don't like it. But yet a lot of guys think by constantly agreeing with them, they're somehow going to get the woman. But we all know that's not true.
Well, now to shift gears just a little bit, because this kind of relates, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the issue of, have you ever seen a case where people get married? This kind of relates to standing up in a way. People get married and you can just tell that the relationship is not where it should be, and one partner or both have an idea they want to change the other person. Either outright, maybe they've told you that, or maybe you could tell it's a secret.
I did a wedding once. Where I'm fairly certain that the groom was gay.
Okay.
fairly certain that the groom was gay, and she married him for whatever safety reason. Now, that's a very general statement. I won't go much farther than that, but I think that she was kind of hoping that he would sort of change.
Stop being that way.
I don't think he was actively in a relationship, but it was like I got this vibe from him that there was, that he wasn't really that attracted to her, and I wasn't sure why they were getting married. And yeah, we asked those questions, and so I don't know what was going on, and maybe my senses were off about that, but that's the big example that I can have. But there's plenty of people that I think you have to remember that when they come in to see me, they're almost always lying to me, almost all the time. Whether they're living together or there's some issue in their marriage or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they come in with this sort of idea, like if we stick this out, or he's gonna. Well, the biggest thing is like if one of them's not Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
That's the biggest,
Yeah.
the easiest one that I can say is that if I marry him, then maybe he'll become Catholic. In fact, we have a little form that we fill out for mixed marriages. So a mixed marriage in the Catholic context is that Catholic is marrying a non-Catholic. Not a mixed marriage in terms of race, but a mixed marriage in terms of religion. And one of the things we fill out is that there's a founded hope for the conversion of the non-Catholic. So we even put it in our paperwork that there's like, if you marry this person, that maybe they'll become Catholic. And 9 times out of 10, it's actually a disaster, because you can't go into marriage. Marriage particularly, you can't go in with any conditions. That's another question we ask: is, are there any conditions on the wedding, on the marriage? And of course, they're lying to me. If there are conditions, they're not going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm only going to marry him if he makes $60,000 a year or more," or "I'm only going to marry her if she has 12 kids." I don't know if when they come, they lie to me all the time, and so I'm not entirely sure what the conditions might be. But I guarantee you that on some of these, that I can see right through them and say, "Oh yeah, she's marrying him contingent on this idea that he's going to want to have 4 kids, and he only wants 1 or none."
Well, in those early phases too, they probably are saying what you want to hear just because they're so committed. They might be overlooking all these faults, but I'm sure they come out later.
Do you see people who think the marriage is going to solve their relationship problems? Like, we hate our lives, we're dysfunctional, but if we get married, everything will be great.
Well, I think that people also get married because they think it's going to fix them personally.
Oh,
like
yeah.
If I'm going to if I get married to this perfect man, and of course everybody thinks everybody's perfect at those stages, because as you all know, as you guys both know, and our listeners now will know, that everybody's insane when they're walking down the aisle. Their brains look like, if you do a brain scan of people in love, it looks like they're doing cocaine. It's true. Yes. And so everybody's a little bit crazy, and it's hard to see people's faults when you're in that.
Yes, it is.
In that position, and the faults come out eventually. And so I do think that people have this sort of fairy tale notion that they're going to be better people, and that this is sort of going to fix me or fix them. And what I tell people is, and this is advice that was given to me, that everything that bothers you before the marriage, if you think of it like a volume, you turn it up to 100. If it's at 10 before the marriage, it goes to 100 after the marriage. Like, marriage amplifies everything that's wrong with the person that you're with. It amplifies the good things. To me, there's good things to marriage. I don't want to say that it's all bad, but I will tell you that I think it's very difficult, and I'm glad that I'm not married, frankly, most of the time. Because again, what bothers you at 10 before the marriage will bother you at 100. It doesn't get better; it gets worse.
So he's sitting around playing video games and won't get a job. It's excusable when you're with him in the first year. When he's been like that for 5 years after marriage, that's going to get a little tired.
Yeah, that cute thing he does on Mario Kart is great when you're dating, but then when he's doing that while he's not looking for a job, it can become an issue.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it could be even just something as small.
But Mario Kart is great. That's
It
not,
isn't.
it's not disparaging Mario.
We love it.
Mario
It's
Kart
not
is
Mario
great.
Kart's
That's
not
problem.
disparage Mario Kart.
It's not a Mario Kart issue.
I think that it can be even more minor than that. If you're eating soup and he slurps it out of the spoon, and you're like, well, that's a little annoying, but I can live with that. And then 25 years of that, you're ready to stab him in the eye with a spoon. That's what happens. So anything that you are bothered with before marriage, you're going to be it's going to be deadly after marriage. And I don't think that people can see those things. And so again, I think getting back to, we kind of got off track there, but getting back to what we were talking about, I do think people get married to change the other person and also to change themselves. And it doesn't work. You have to accept the person for who they are. I think the only exception to that is when people get married very young. And they have an opportunity to grow together. If you get married, but people aren't getting married at 18 anymore. I think in my whole career, I've done 4 or 5 weddings of people that are 20 or under. And I do think that there is a benefit to getting married that young, although I think that's also very hard. I worked in a Hispanic parish for a while, and they get married very young there, but then they have lots of troubles in their mid-20s. I'll say that again. I can't tell you how many difficulties I encountered with the Latino community because they got married at 17 and a half. And at 25, all of a sudden they're still young. And
well, even the divorce stats bear that out. If you're married, I think under 26, you're much more likely to get divorced than if you
But my point is that you have an opportunity at least to grow together that you don't necessarily have if you're marrying somebody at 30.
Right.
At 30, you have to just accept them for who they are.
True, they're probably not going to change.
They're probably not going to change. At 18, you can sort of guess that they are going to change. At 30, most people you have to accept them for who they are. And most people are getting married around that age now.
Yeah, I think that is and millennials are getting married later and later.
If they get married at all.
If they get married at all.
That's true.
Marriage is actually down. I do a lot less weddings. I do a lot of weddings still, but I'd say that I have a lot fewer coming in. Some of that's because of where I work, but I have a lot fewer coming in than I used to.
So millennials are killing the church wedding business too, then, is what you're saying.
Well, they're not
killing every business.
They're not really religious people either.
Well,
so
that's true.
That's why I say that 20 years ago, I think that people, I graduated high school in '96. I would say people were more religious, genuinely religious back then.
Absolutely.
And this generation is not as religious.
I think the fastest growing is non-affiliated in terms of religious.
Well, and they want the church wedding because that's what mom and dad want.
Right.
So that's why I say you kind of have to qualify it. And I would even say that even the super religious ones, don't live chaste lives. Sometimes they live together and they justify it this or that the other way. So,
Well, that's what the study he referenced, or the studies that Rolf Dagan spoke of in his article, is that really even the religious people pretty much went with the crowd with their non-religious peers. So, the rates on like cheating on tests and stuff was pretty similar. And the reasoning is that everybody else does it. So I think it would be hard to fight the culture on things like living together and all of that. So that might account for it as well.
Yeah, I think that religion for a lot of people is very peripheral these days.
Yeah.
I mean, the average age of priests, what I do, is 68.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and I'm 40, so I'm way younger than the average, and I look a lot younger than that too. See?
Yeah, exactly.
Friends. So, yeah,
Ask him about his skin health techniques.
Yeah.
So I think that, but even amongst the again, I've heard lots of high school confessions of Catholic school kids, and when eighth graders come in and tell you things that I didn't even know about until I was a junior in high school, and they're doing these things on a routine basis, and then they go to mass on Sunday. So I think you have to qualify religion for what it is. It's an ideal that we're supposed to strive for, and people fall short.
When you had to hit Urban Dictionary after confession to find out what an act is,
right.
That's when our youth is in a little bit of trouble.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, I've had to do that. I've had to wonder what the heck they were talking about.
So you've dealt with you do a lot of pre-marriage counseling, is that right?
As little as possible. I actually don't do that much because I don't think they're going to listen to me.
Okay.
So I prepare them for marriage. I make them go through the pre-Cana stuff, but I don't really give them much advice because first of all, they can't hear it because they're nuts.
Right.
That's true.
Their brains are on cocaine, and they don't buy it anyway. Coming from a non-married guy.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of so you've dealt with some people before, but mostly you counsel people who are married and have some issues, maybe.
Yeah, I would. Yes, I at the point that they come in, if you're in a marriage in crisis, at the point that you're coming in, someone is dragging the other person in.
I see.
Not 100% of the time. Nobody comes in and be like, yeah, we both decided this was a great idea, because that's just not how it works. It's her idea or his idea, and so automatically someone's shut down. Now sometimes it works. I know how to. The next thing is that, so number one, someone's dragging the other person in, which means that somebody's already checked out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I'm really getting at, is somebody's already checked out, and this is like the last ditch effort. I've saved some marriages, but I'd say that it's hard. I have my own program that I do with people, but about halfway through, somebody bails out. It's usually the person that was being dragged in.
Right.
The second thing is that they are so full of resentment toward each other, because when you're getting married, all you can see is the good stuff. After you've been married for a while, all you see is the bad stuff, like that amplifier, and it goes to 100. That's when all you hear is like screeching all the time, from a speaker. I'm not saying that he's screeching at her, she's screeching at him. But when you it's all you can concentrate on. You can't enjoy anything if like feedback from a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just can't concentrate on anything else. So that's what happens when they come in. They're usually just so sick of each other or one is just checked out, and all they can do is say, well, he did this and she did that, and he goes out every night and she won't talk to me anymore, and he has dumb friends and plays Mario Kart all the time, and and she she won't have sex, for instance, or he won't have sex. Sometimes it goes
right.
Sometimes he won't. He's the one that, you hear that sometimes wives go frigid on their husbands, but oftentimes men go frigid on their wives. I mean, it just happens for a variety of reasons, which you can talk about in another podcast, right? But I think that that's the next thing that happens. And so, what I try to get them to do is sort of look at their own faults before they start pointing the finger at the other person. Now, a lot of times people will come in and one is more at fault than the other. One is more at fault than the other, and so it's kind of hard to get the victim, so to speak, not to sort of say, yes, I was wrong in this area, but there's often fault on both sides. There's a reason maybe she was unfaithful or he was unfaithful, because they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing as a husband or wife, and they're like, well, he cheated on me. I'm like, well, what did you, where did you fall short of? Well, I didn't fall short. He cheated on me. Well, or she cheated on me. Well, you fall short when you stop being attractive.
Right.
As something that I think that the three of us have kind of come up with over the years, and we've known each other for a long time, is attraction is not a choice. You can't help who you're attracted to, but you can be attractive.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can skew things in your favor. And so when a couple comes in and she says, well, he cheated on me, or he says she cheated on me, and it happens as much with both people, I wonder where they stop being attractive to the other person. Maybe they are playing Mario Kart every day for 6 hours. Maybe they are, maybe she is nagging him. Who knows? Both people fall short. And they don't want to acknowledge that. So what I try to do is get them to look at their own faults, try to begin to forgive that, and then to sort of shift them back toward where they were at the beginning of their relationship, where all they're seeing is the good stuff. Where they're never going to get back to the point where they only see the good stuff again. That will never happen in a bad relationship or any relationship. But what I'm trying to get them to do is to see the bad stuff less and to see that there is actually good in the relationship. That's hard for them after 10 years of him picking his nose and wiping it on the wall or something like that, which happens, or he stops caring, or he turns into a baby. That happens a lot. Oh my gosh, that happens so much, where the man turns into a big baby and she turns into mom.
Really?
Oh, that happens a lot. Happens a lot. And who's going to be attracted to a man when he's a baby?
Absolutely no one.
Absolutely no one.
Well, it's good you mentioned the attraction point, because when we work with different media outlets, we almost always go back to that, and it's they view it as like, wow, they're like taking notes. This is amazing, but to us, it's not that amazing that even if you're married, you should make an effort to still be attractive.
And we really hate the idea that once you're in a relationship, that's the time to let yourself go.
There's a Simpsons on that.
Yes.
Flanders and Homer get drunk and get married to these two girls in Vegas.
Yep.
And they're at the breakfast buffet, and she's like, "Eat all you want. We're married. We can just let ourselves go."
Yep.
And I'm just like, but men do it too. I mean,
It's both
sides.
It's both sides.
To some degree, men may do it even more.
I think that what happens is men become big babies, and that's how
Yes.
they do it. Is they want the nurturing part without the other. And I also think they give in too much. I think that sometimes they're just like that guy that came in and just could not stand to his wife, and she did not respect him for it. She needed to be stood up to, and so she was wrong some of the time. And she didn't respect the fact that he wouldn't stand up for himself.
Well, and people think that you should always accept people as is, but really, by failing to remain your best or your most attractive, you're really showing you have a pretty low view of the relationship. If the other person was worth, working out for or giving your best charm and time for before the marriage, but once you get married, you suddenly give all that away. That's a very bad attitude, ultimately.
Yeah, I think that just because you're married doesn't mean you're going to be attracted to the other person, and it's not like this default setting. You have to remain attractive to the other person. Attraction is not a choice. I don't believe that it's a choice, but being attractive is, and you can make yourself put yourself in that position of being attractive to your spouse, to where they don't really have a choice but to be attracted to you.
But they can't turn down your advances.
But if
they are madly in love with you.
If he's sitting on his tuchus, in a 3-day-old T-shirt and one sock on,
playing Mario Kart.
Or
by the way, buy Mario Kart.
Or Dungeons and Dragons or something. Yeah. If he's doing that, she's not going to be. And again, if she lets herself go and doesn't make herself attractive to him, nags him, is mean to him, doesn't support him. I mean, it goes both ways. He might be mean to her, not support her. Who knows? But people, I think what happens is they sort of let go and they stop. It's work. It is work.
It is.
You work to be attractive to the other person. And you have to work to be a whole person in and of yourself. Marriage is not going to make you a whole person. It's not going to fix you. You come into that marriage with all your faults and all your difficulties, and they don't just slough away because you put a ring on a finger.
That is some great wisdom. You pronouncing them man and wife doesn't automatically end all their problems. In fact, I would argue it makes many of them worse, because now you're maybe possibly living together where if you weren't before, you're sharing finances, you're merging everything, you're dependent on that person in a way you never were before. So it might actually exacerbate some of the problems that don't exist already.
Well, living together doesn't change this before marriage. Living together, it's some weird thing when you walk down the aisle and put the ring on each other's finger, even if you've been living together for 10 years. I know people that lived together for 10 years, they got married and were divorced in 3 months.
Wow.
You know, I didn't do that.
Is that because of that firm line, this is official, this is legal, there's no easy exit maybe, or?
I think that's some of it, but I think that there's a psychological thing that happens when you commit, when you commit to each other. That somebody might let their demons out. You can lie for years about who you are. I can't tell you how many annulments I've done where somebody's like, I didn't know that he had a severe drug problem until the night of our honeymoon.
Wow.
And I saw him shoot up for the first time. It's like, what? You know, I've heard that. I've done an annulment where she did not know he had a severe drug problem until the night of their honeymoon, in which that she saw him shoot up for the first time.
Man.
Yeah.
I guess you get that attitude of, hey, we're committed forever here after this point. I can tell you,
Well,
now I'll spring it on you.
Yeah, I've got you locked in now, so now I can tell you this, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I see that all the time. And I think that's the thing. My spiritual director, I had this great spiritual director. He sounded like this is an old commercial, but the Smucker's jelly guy. So he was great to listen to. And one of the things he said, and I think this is a very valuable thing for people to understand, at the beginning of a relationship, there's 8 people in the relationship. There's the 2 real people. Then there's the ideal that they both have in their head about who their mate should be. So that's what we were talking about earlier. Is you kind of have this ideal mate, and then you have the one you get attracted to. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not. Then you have the person that you pretend to be, so that people will like you. So that's 5 and 6. And then you have the projection. You project onto the other person what you want them to be.
Wow.
So there's actually 8 people involved in the beginning of a relationship. There's the 2 real people that's buried underneath the ideal, the projection, and the fake. And then what happens when they get married is all of those people die except for the originals, and hopefully you like what's there, but most people don't. I thought that's great.
That's very.
I did not come up with that.
That's
great. It's great wisdom.
Stuff.
And I completely agree with it, because by the time you're a year into marriage, even sometimes 6 months, or like I said, the night of their honeymoon, that guy shot up. All of a sudden, the ideals are gone, the projection's gone, the fake is gone, and you're just left with the raw, real person.
Yeah, and reality hits you hard.
And that's why marriage is so hard. I think a lot of people just can't see. They're so high when they get married, they just can't see it.
In that guy's case, literally.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So to wrap up a little bit here, what you've seen couples, you've seen them come, you've seen them go. Well, we won't go there, but you've so seen them come, seen them go. What makes them stay together? What makes them not last? I'm sorry, I'm laughing like a 13-year-old here.
That's okay. It's all right. What makes them stay together? I think we just covered it. I think that there's authenticity involved.
Okay.
I think you have to be who you are, at the beginning, and not. That's hard for people. It's hard to be authentic when you first meet somebody and you're going on dates and stuff. I think you have to make yourself be attractive. You have to figure out what attracts the other person. You have to do that thing.
So that spark kind of stays there the whole time.
Yeah, it doesn't. And it's not going to stay there naturally. All that dopamine and all those things that create that high for us, that make us fall in love with each other and blah blah blah. That doesn't last. So you have to work to make yourself be attractive. You have to not be not be pushovers.
Yep.
Particularly men should not be pushovers. I'm not saying that they should dominate their wives. I'm not saying any of that kind of stuff. But no, like we said earlier in the podcast here, no woman wants a guy who's just a wet noodle.
That's right.
So
we're getting really on the 13-year-old here.
I know.
I just can't stop
that.
But
we're joking. Everybody who's listening knows why we're laughing.
You're just hot dogging.
But both physically and metaphorically, nobody wants that.
Right.
No.
So I think what makes them stay together is that they're willing to work on themselves. I think is honestly what makes people stay. Is that they don't just let go and make the other person do all the work. Again, men will do that to women. They'll become little babies because they want mommy to do all the work for them. Well, that's not an attractive man. Likewise, women will test their husbands and to see if they're going to stand up for them and protect them and do the right by them. So I think honestly what makes people stay together is people that work on themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's great.
I think that is absolutely what makes people, and what makes people fly apart is that they're dishonest, fundamentally dishonest. Like, we're all dishonest at some extent, but like the guy with the drug problem who hid that from his fiancée for a couple of years until their wedding night, in which he could sort of show that he was being inauthentic.
Well, yeah, I think inauthentic is a better word there.
Yeah,
Lack
well,
of
inauthentic
authenticity.
and dishonest,
Yeah.
I think are kind of, they're kind of two sides of the one. Is psychologically they're kind of different terms.
True.
But
Inauthentic is just a deeper level of dishonesty.
that's right. Yeah, and
With yourself,
So
too.
I think that people need to be but that's dangerous. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
whole other podcast. Is sort of being vulnerable is dangerous because people can hurt us then.
That's
so
right.
there's a great book I think I've recommended to you guys. I don't know if you read it or not, but it's called Click. It's what makes people click together, like what makes people have instant rapport. And the chief thing is vulnerability. If you're able to be vulnerable to somebody, and so another word for that is authentic, I think, then you form deep bonds quickly. And I think that people are not authentic with each other. And I think if they want to stay together, they have to be authentic. And one of those things is, I was just reading this book, The 12 Rules of Life.
Yes.
It's a great book. I really highly recommend it. It's not a religious book, it's a secular book. But one of the things he talks about is, these little tiny things at the beginning of marriages where they don't talk about it. This little tiny thing. And then 10 years later, it blows up into this giant thing. If they just mentioned this little thing that was bothering them 10 years ago, then they would still be married.
Is it a dragon he talks about? Like the image of something that keeps growing and getting bigger? I read the book. It sounds bad. It's Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Keeps getting bigger and bigger, and everyone ignores it.
Ignores it until you can't ignore it anymore. Well, and of course, the three of us went through some management school together.
Yes.
People ignore problems they can't solve until they get to crisis level,
Yes.
And I think that happens. And I think the authenticity is about speaking up, which is horrifying because what if they don't like what we say?
Right.
And it's a risk. So I think authenticity, I think making yourself attractive, being genuinely attractive, working on yourself, I think that's what keeps people together. It's not expecting the other person to fill in all your gaps. I just don't think that's what keeps people together.
That's a great answer, and that's what we would even say would get you dates too. Working on yourself and being authentic.
It's kind of the same process, really.
It is.
You're not giving up on
attracting
something.
someone in the beginning, and you're keeping them attracted to you.
And that's what
later on.
And that's what the so-called, that they don't use this term anymore, but the pickup artists that have come along really are not about being authentic. It's about tricking the girl into something. But I think that being attractive is being authentically strong, authentically good, authentically trying to be the best version of yourself. You can be being excellent.
Absolutely.
You
And people
don't
are
need
going
tricks, you're
to fight them off at that point.
That's
true.
true.
You're going to fight them off. If you're trying to get dates, you're going to fight because women can see. If you're talking to men here, women can see genuine goodness, and men too.
Yes.
I just had a conversation with somebody. I told you about this. That is an authentically good woman. She's just and she's a very attractive person. And because of everything that she tries to be excellent, and it's very attractive. It's not just about beauty necessarily, but I think it's about being the best version of yourself that you can be. Which
absolutely
for men and women both, you're going to beat them off with a stick at that point, and you're going to have long-lasting relationships because who's going to want to leave the best guy in the room or the best girl in the room?
Exactly.
Nobody. If you're just a pill, if you're just awful, run for the hills. And I've thought that before. I've thought at weddings, like, run, just don't talk to him.
Don't walk down the aisle. Run the opposite direction.
It goes both ways. And just as they're walking down the aisle, I'm sitting there going, "This is a giant mistake," for them because
we see
one or the other is awful, but sometimes they're awful together and they belong.
And they deserve each other.
We've seen kind of the whole, and then we should probably wrap up with this, but we've seen on, even like Instagram, you see it's all about this upcoming day, everything's great, but we know the behind the scenes, and behind the scenes are just a mess. And we know that it's once that the momentary high from the day and maybe possibly the honeymoon are over, it's just going to the inauthenticity is going to come out, and it's going to collapse.
Well, like my spiritual director said, all those the 6 people die, and all that's left are the original 2, the real ones. The projection dies, the ideal dies, the fake dies. and all you're left is the reality. And sometimes that's not very good.
Yeah.
As
This is
that
why
movie-
we fake it sometimes. Why
Right,
we
yeah,
fake
the
who we
movie, wasn't
are.
that in a
Yeah.
movie, Reality Bites? And I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of people. That's the way relationships become if they don't be honest with themselves and their partner, and keep, like you said, keep up that same level of excellence they did previously.
I think it's one of you guys that said, "Do your best now," isn't it?
Yep.
Isn't
Do
it
your
Yeah,
best
one
now.
of
Yeah.
our things? Yeah.
Do your
that
best now.
we talked about. So
Well, we appreciate having you on, Father
Yeah, it was
Wagner.
great to
We'll
have you
have
on
to
the
have you on
show.
again because there's a lot of insight in this. So
It's amazing how, even though we do what seems like radically different things, they intersect in so many ways.
well,
do.
I know relationships. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've done so many weddings and seen so many annulments, and there is a way that it works, whether you're religious or not. It
That's
doesn't
right.
really make a boatload of difference,
that's right.
because there is a human nature, and you can either accept that there's a human nature, or you can deny it. And
Absolutely.
lots of people deny it because they don't want to accept the reality, but then they're miserable.
And we're here to disrupt all that.
That's right.
That's right.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot. We appreciate you coming on, and we'll have you on again soon.
All right, guys.
Sound good?
Thanks.
Great. Thanks.